Welcome to the Geek 101 podcast. Arrowverse Crisis Part 2, Episode 4 and 5. I'm your host, Andy Bowman, and with me, as always, are good friends, Tessa and Sam. How are you guys doing today?
Pretty good.
Glad it's all over, finally. The universe no longer exists.
Feels like it's been a marathon. Like we're at the end.
Well, there's only one CW show that I need to watch now, and I'm okay with that.
I mean,
after finishing Arrow.
Yeah. You already got your Bebo fix for the season, though, so.
Yeah, that was a surprise. But we should just go ahead and jump right into it. Episode 4. You know, when we left off, the 7 Paragons went to the vanishing point, a point outside of time. It didn't have much hope left in them. And then all of a sudden, one of the Paragons, played by Brendan Routh, who is Superman, dies, and Lex Luthor crawls out of his skin, revealing that he had scribbled on the Book of Destiny, crossing Superman's name out and writing his own name in.
I mean, that's pretty much the most Lex Luthor move Lex Luthor's ever made. So that was good.
Is it though? Is him scribbling his name on the back of the last page of the Book of Destiny the most Lex Luthor thing, or the fact that he also managed to give himself powers, which we find out in this episode?
Well, exactly.
Well, not only did he manage to give himself powers, but he kept it from everyone else, right? He kept it until it was actually advantageous for him to reveal that.
Yeah, they don't really tell us how long they were in the vanishing point, but it was months, right? Like, Ryan has a beard, but everybody's uniforms are still like pristine.
You know, as much of a bad idea it probably is to compare Crisis to Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, I find myself doing it all the time. This is clearly the beginning of Endgame with sad Tony in space.
Everybody's sad. Yeah. Supergirl's lost her hope. The Flash.
There's flashbacks to key moments.
Yeah. It's very like it is supposed to be like the lowest point of Crisis, where they're stuck in the vanishing point and they're the only eight people.
Does this make Lex Luthor Captain Marvel?
No, I think that makes Oliver Captain Marvel.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I can live with that, I guess.
So, well, and then also, so Barry does Barry and tries to escape the vanishing point using the Speed Force and is gone for most of the time that they're there, I guess. Like, he comes back and he's like, oh, I've only been gone 2 minutes. And they're like, you've been gone like 4 months. So that's also interesting. But his whole experiment in the Speed Force is, I guess, the tipping point for why Oliver comes back. I wasn't completely sure about how Oliver just showed up, but it had something to do with the Speed Force. But he shows up as the Spectre.
Yeah, so instead of rewriting time and screwing everything up, maybe Barry brought Oliver to them this time. So that was good, messing with the Speed Force.
Yeah, and I will say I wasn't too big a fan of the sound effect that they had during this part, right? Like, Oliver's voice is kind of grating and hard to understand.
Yeah, I also thought the Spectre cloak made him look bigger. Like he had suddenly, put on 75 pounds. Once he stopped training. Like, it was so weird.
Although I did enjoy the Ryan, he looks like a total Sith. Mm-hmm. Yes, that was a good moment. But, well, who's left? So it's Ryan, Lex, Supergirl, Batwoman, Flash,
Martian Manhunter,
and
Sarah Lance.
Sarah, yes. Yeah, I'm sorry. Of course I saved the best for last. Sarah. There's 7, right? And then Oliver makes 8.
Yes.
Right. But Oliver's not really one of the Paragons. He's the Spectre. He's an otherworldly power.
Right.
Not to be confused with Spectre, the James Bond franchise evil corporation led by Ernst Blofeld. Not to be confused.
New
Right.
crossover.
Anyway, a little switcheroo gets pulled, and we get our first and really only cameo we'll really be excited about because this is insane. This is I mean, anyone who's listening has seen it on Twitter, but we got Ezra Miller as the Flash.
Yeah, so when Oliver gives them a plan. So they have to go, they're splitting up into two teams. One of them's going to stop the Monitor before he became the Monitor from opening the portal to the anti-matter universe, and the other team is going to the Dawn of Time to fight the anti-Monitor. But of course they get stuck in the Speed Force along the way, and as Barry gets stuck, the first person that he sees is the Ezra Miller DCEU version of the Flash. And like, I think for us it was so surprising and yet also kind of vindicating at the same time, because we've talked a lot about on these recaps how Warner Brothers has insisted this entire time keeping the DCEU separate from the Arrowverse. Like, you can't use Suicide Squad because we're going to make a movie out of it. You can't use Deathstroke. Oh, you can use him again. No, you can't use him again. So there's a lot of that going on, and so this just felt like they were finally like admitting, like, okay, the Arrowverse is actually like a functional part of this series of properties. What did you guys think?
Well, first of all, I do have a theory that during the Flash movie, which was just confirmed and dated and all that, I think we see this side of the cameo, or Ezra Miller's side of the cameo in it.
That would be nice. That's all I wanted with Dark Phoenix and Deadpool doing the other side of the cameo. I think it would be really good to follow through on these ideas once in a while. That would be great.
Well, there was a big like announcement that they are going to be doing Flashpoint in a way you don't expect. So I really think that, as an experiment or something, we see Ezra Miller's side of this happenstance. I think that'll be a great little thing. I think that also might be why Warner Brothers pushed it.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, yeah, because Guggenheim has said that this was a call on Warner Bros. Part. Like, they had pretty much wrapped everything, and then he got a call from Warner Bros. Saying, like, hey, like, can you do a cameo with Ezra Miller? And he says, I will make this happen. Like, and it was like very complicated because they'd already wrapped a lot of things, and the only person who knew about it though was Grant Gustin, apparently.
The only actor who knew.
The only actor who knew about it was Grant Gustin. And so
Grant Gustin isn't a person.
he is an idea.
Well, they said later on that, the entire crew knew, and it was really cool that, close to 200 people all agreed to keep a secret and did. But also Grant Gustin is not a person, and he's not 30 years old either. So
But I think that's interesting though. Like, this wasn't like, Guggenheim and Berlanti soliciting, this cameo, that this was something that came from on high, as it were, which makes it, again, it feels very vindicating, I think.
Yeah. I literally got up and walked around and just kind of laughed. Ezra Miller even says, like, I told Victor this could happen, referencing Cyborg. Like, that alone, it's not just a little visual cameo.
So no chance that this all happens in the Snyder Cut, and like we would have known this 5 years ago, or how many years ago it was that we'd had the Snyder Cut. 3 years ago?
Feels like 5 years ago.
Feels like 5 years ago. 2020's already been 17 years. Time does not matter anymore.
Actually, 2.5, because it came out in November 2017.
Oh, so, wow.
I really enjoyed though, because I like Ezra Miller as the Flash, and so I really enjoyed his little joke about, like, your uniform looks so comfortable, because I've always thought that the Flash uniform that he wears looks very uncomfortable. So it was a good cameo. I really liked it. Like, it wasn't just like shock value. Like, there was actually some substance to it.
I mean, as much as I liked Hour 5, this is the highlight of Hour 4.
Yeah, which is weird when a kind of throwaway cameo in the grand scheme of things is the highlight. This wasn't a bad episode by any means, but it suffers from its budget being a CW show.
Mm-hmm.
But also the action sequence later is still somehow a better Justice League movie than Justice League.
It's not a very high bar. I think part of the problem with hour 4, as well as the first 3 hours, now that we can kind of talk about them all together, is that the way that they put together Crisis was not great. And, you know, Tessa and I have talked over the last month about another popular franchise that had a very large entry last month. And, you know, some of the problems, you know, when you have a story that's a good story, but you don't agree with the choices in the story, that's something. You know, we can all talk about that and we can say, well, I would have liked it better this way, but, you know, there's merit in the way that it was. I think part of the problem with the way that Crisis episodes 1 through 4 were executed were not that great. There were choices that were made that just don't make much sense. Some of them apparently have to do with casting choices, who was paid for which episode and what could happen. But, you know, it really ended at the end of the episode 4. Well, once we watched episode 5 and we're really happy with how things turned out, it was like we needed the 4 episodes to get to the good one. And I thought, well, that's not really a good reason to spend 4 episodes watching TV for the 5th episode payoff, especially when we could have made the 5th episode last, you know, longer. It could have been 2 episodes. Maybe we should have done, you know, episodes 1 through 4 in 3 episodes, had the month break, and then had this reset be 2 episodes instead.
Well, I will say part of the other problem is that one of the reasons why episode 5 works so well is that it's a lot more focused, I think, on specific characters than this episode is. This episode tries to give several characters their due, and it doesn't always work. Although I will say, I actually really liked the Oliver storyline. I mean, it takes it takes a lot of nerve to do what they did with Oliver over these 5 episodes, but I do like the idea that, like, this is the end of his story arc. Like, everything that we've seen in Arrow so far, they even say that, like, everything you've been through so far is, like, prepared you for this. And there's a lot of, like, really good flashbacks to some really emotional moments in Arrow, to some really triumphant moments in Arrow. And I think, I mean, I know that there are still 2 episodes of Arrow left, but I think that in terms of, like, a character arc, Stephen Amell is playing to his strengths here. I think that he does a pretty good job of sort of giving us that emotional payoff.
Right. I do believe that Stephen Amell will be popping back up in the role of the Spectre. I don't think it'll be something that happens, you know, every season in these CW shows, but I just feel like that's a great way to just have him kind of go in really quick and then leave. Yeah, basically, I just think Stephen Amell will be open to making special appearances in future crossovers.
That's what I was going to ask you, if you thought you're thinking about future crossovers. Which I think is going to be really interesting going forward, especially with that. That would be neat.
Yeah. But, I mean...
With him as, like, a Spectre or kind of a Force Ghost, right? I mean, my wife did say he looked a lot like Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah. Well, but if he's not corporeal, he can't sit in his chair.
Well, we'll get to that in the
right.
amazing cliffhanger.
Well, I mean, again, too, like, this felt like, I mean, for all the faults of this episode, this did feel like we were getting somewhere narratively. Like, the last couple of episodes were definitely fetch quests. This was definitely, like, main quest. We've got to do 2 things, and we've got to prevent this from happening. Which, I mean, both of those things are in the original comic. I mean, they do go to try to prevent the original, I don't remember what his name is before he's the Monitor, to prevent him from
Novu.
Mar Novu. Right, that's right. Mar Novu. to prevent him from changing time. And of course, Lex tries to fuck it up, like because it's Lex, Supergirl, and Ryan, and like Lex reveals that he has powers and that he's going to try to use Marnovu for world domination, I guess. I'm not completely sure what Lex's plan is here. He wants to change time or something. But the whole point of this is that he and Supergirl fight, and because he has powers, it's actually kind of an even fight. So that was kind of cool, I guess.
Yeah, and another thing here, this is also Barry going through the Speed Force because he's really the only one who can run through the Speed Force. And it's kind of a weird, like, passing down the torch to Barry as the senior superhero.
Which immediately gets undercut in the next hour, oddly.
Yeah, but we'll talk about that. I just want to go over the scenes that we see different angles from, and certain characters see these scenes for the first time and realize something about themselves that they didn't know before. The first major one. Well, is it really the first major one? Okay, we see the first time that Barry and Oliver met.
Yes.
That was neat. That was a cool thing. Also, the way that this is shot has a filter over the footage that I'm just going to call DCEU. All right.
It's kind of
or
true.
maybe David Fincher.
There was a frame change, wasn't there? It went to a wider frame.
I noticed that too.
Yes.
Like the scenes in the Speed Force are supposed to be cinematic.
I would. Yeah, it's the reverse Nolan, where he switches to IMAX and the frame gets bigger. We're getting smaller because we're having more letterbox.
Right. Well, also it's kind of amusing. I think they did it for one scene before, but I like the idea that he bumps into Ezra Miller and then it goes letterbox. That's cinematic.
I like that. It's interesting.
But it does have like a David Fincher like hue to it here.
Mm-hmm.
But we get to see the scientist, which is when Barry and Oliver met. We get a quick little part with with Sarah's dead body, where Barry basically runs up and steals Sarah's dead body in front of Diggle and Laurel.
Reanimates her and then steals her.
I like how everybody, all the other characters, get to observe scenes and like make realizations about their character. Sarah's just dead, which maybe means she doesn't need any more realizations.
Well, and considering what happens in the next episode, I do think this specific scene was supposed to remind us of how far Sarah has come as a character.
A second rebirth, even?
Yeah, maybe? Because she plays such a major role in the next episode, I do think this was supposed to, hint to us, oh, remember when she was Black Canary and she died? There's this sort of reminding us of where these characters have been and how far they've come.
Now, one thing I really want to mention here that makes me so happy and I'm just chuckling. But Barry basically tells Diggle and Laurel they're not really here. Cut to the next scene where we see a little thing from the Invasion crossover where Oliver admits he's very racist against aliens. Then Martian Manhunter shows up and just goes ahead and gives a speech. Like a very Martian Manhunter style speech to these two people who aren't really there.
In these weird, semi-dream states where you're lucid and trying to make changes about your life, your mileage really may vary.
Maybe it was more about what he needed to say.
I mean,
than what they needed to hear.
Yeah, it was all about you will grow to trust each other.
Yeah.
But it just made me laugh so much.
And that scene is also really important, like Tessa said about Sarah's scene. We get, it's really important for Berlanti, Guggenheim, all the Super DC friends to make sure that we know that Martian Manhunter is a major player. And, not just a Supergirl character, but he is a member of the Justice League. And so, I guess this was probably one of those points where they wanted to build that speech up and make us realize that too.
Did anyone notice too in this scene specifically that Supergirl has bangs?
Yeah, there was no wig. No wig.
Yeah, I don't know if that was an.
Did she have a skirt?
I'd have to go back and look at it again, but I think she was wearing the new uniform too. I would be really interested to know if that was an oversight or if this is supposed to tell us again, is this a lucid dream situation where, it's supposed to remind us that these characters are remembering these things, but they're not happening right at that moment.
Yeah, I would go with that just because it's the Speed Force, and continuity errors never happen in television shows.
Nope,
especially not on this.
Don't. Psycho Pirate.
What even happened to Psycho Pirate?
You know what So I read an interview where basically they decided not to use him because he didn't fit, and they were like,
Good.
it's it's the same thing about the original Flash headline. At this point, Barry was supposed to fight. Which one?
Originally, so in the first season of The Flash, when they introduce us to the headline where he goes missing, he's supposed to disappear during a fight with the Reverse Flash, not during Crisis.
Right. So what they've said is that, we didn't want to be beholden to a headline that we wrote 6 years ago, and we realized that we put the Psycho Pirate in at the end of Elseworlds because he is in Crisis, the original source material. And we kept writing him and taking him out and putting him back in and taking him out. We realized the only reason he was in there was the original comic. So we just decided not to.
Honestly, though, the headline thing doesn't bother me too much because they've messed around with time so much on these shows that to me it's just how does anything even happen in this universe? How does today, come after yesterday in this universe? They've messed around with time so much. It doesn't really bother me that that's not the headline anymore.
Right. And finally, the little last part is the end climax where Oliver kills John Deegan Superman or burns the Book of Destiny or whatever, and then the Flash gets to talk to Oliver and find out about the deal the Arrow made.
Did anyone hear Kate Bush singing in the background?
No.
During this?
What was she singing?
Do you want to know about the deal?
Oh, right. Yes, okay. All right, that'll work.
Yeah, we've heard so much about this deal, and I think we all knew what it was before Barry did, that he was essentially trading his life for Barry and Kara's.
We definitely knew what it was, and also what was happening at the second that they announced that Arrow's final season would be season 8.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this isn't really a surprise for us. It's more of an emotional move for Barry, right? To realize that Oliver's death wasn't random, that it was something that was attached to him. Which, I complained last episode that Barry doesn't get to talk to Oliver before he dies the first time, and how I thought that was kind of an oversight on their part, considering how much they've thrown these two characters together and spent so much time developing their relationship. I think that this fourth episode does sort of correct that a little bit. We get this scene, and then we get another later scene between him and Oliver that I think helps wrap that up a little bit.
And Barry gets to tell Oliver that he trusts him with every cell in his body, which is just weird. But anyway, let's.
Well, hold on. Let's not forget too. It's very easily forgettable because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But Kate gets a scene too. She gets the scene where Oliver and Ray are arguing.
That's right.
Which makes it works, I guess, because new person to the group. Oliver didn't accept new people, and Kate's a new person. Whatever. She got a moment.
Yeah, it was fine.
It was a way of putting Ray in the episode of letting. Because I'm sure they paid him for the entire crossover. So, also,
yeah. And then at the beginning of the universe, or however many millions of years ago,
At the dawn of time.
Marnovu's going to do his stupid little experiment to just go back, and they make a comment of how stupid his costume is, and it's all about the radiation, whatever. Lex comes in, convinces him to do something else, makes some kind of deal with him, and then Supergirl comes in and stops it, and that whole thing was kind of useless.
That's the way most Plan A's go in the Arrowverse.
Well, again, so the other thing about this scene, the only thing I can think that why they had this scene in there, besides the fact that it's in the original comics, is the character of Ryan, who, let's face it, Ryan is not an interesting character so far. He's just sort of there, and he has a baby, and that's about it. But I think if they're planning on integrating him into the Arrowverse later on, the way that most comic book fans think that they will, because he is the new Adam after Ray Palmer, this scene makes a little sense because he's being introduced to this idea of heroism. He's being introduced to these other heroes. Supergirl gives him at least 2 pep talks during this episode. So, I guess it kind of makes sense if they're planning on integrating him more into the universe eventually.
Right, and Marnovu tells him he's very unique, which is something he needed to hear. And you know what? It's something I need to hear, so go ahead and tweet me. Tell me I'm unique, that I'm special.
We should all tell each other.
I'm going to forget I said that, and then like a week or 2 from now, like people are just going to start tweeting me, you're special.
I'm going to make a note of that right now.
You should. Yeah. Set a reminder in your phone. Tweet at Andy that he is special. Actually, you should say whatever, we should go back and rewatch just that scene and just tweet the entire pep talk at him.
I've never met anyone as unique as you or whatever.
But yeah, that's basically it. I mean, it's just character work, Lex, Supergirl, they fight.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
But this wouldn't be a CW crossover without a very large action set piece killing a bunch of terribly CGI'd figures while something else happens and a big beam attacks another big beam. And that's exactly what we get against the Anti-Monitor.
Yep. You can't have a superhero or any big budget anything or any event without a skybeam. So.
And apparently Dementors?
Mm-hmm.
Was anyone else getting real Dementor vibes? They all really should have gone to Hogwarts before doing this.
A skybeam, Dementors, and a Sith Lord walk into a DC crossover. That's what just happened.
But yeah.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, and then Oliver dies again.
Right.
For real this time.
Right. Oliver dies and pretty much restarted the entire universe, did the Big Bang, but there's only one now.
Right, and we do get this really great, I will say, a really good scene between, as Oliver's dying, because Steve and I all got to do all the death scenes. We do actually get to see Barry and Sarah, who are the characters who've probably known him the longest out of the group, get to say goodbye to him, which I think, again, I think that they needed that. I think they killed him so fast last time that we didn't get to kind of set with it, and that this time we got to kind of set with it a bit, and I think that was good, while the new universe circles above them, ominously.
Right. And then we get to episode 5, which has a truly clever opening.
Episode 5 is great, you guys. I love this episode. It's the Legends episode.
What a coincidence! It's also the best one in.
Who knew? It's like.
Okay. First things that happen is Kara wakes up
and almost kills her sister.
And she's confused, and she's missing an award ceremony. She doesn't understand what's happening, and all of a sudden, Lex Luthor is alive and accepting, what is it, a Nobel Peace Prize?
It's a Nobel Peace Prize.
Which in the new universe, those are awarded in America. So
apparently.
Yeah.
And Lex winks at Supergirl, and this is John Cryer's only scene in this, right?
Yeah, and it really leaves you the question, is like, does he know what happened? Because none of the rest of them know at first.
No. They all do.
Yeah.
All the Paragons know.
Well, no.
Only the aliens know.
Yeah,
right?
because
that's the thing.
Because the Martian. No. The Flash knows too.
Right.
Yeah, the Martian Manhunter has to go around and reawaken everybody else's memories. That's right. So
right.
Lex does
the
know.
non-Paragons.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That was a little confusing, I think, at first. Because I think it's because Kara's so confused at first.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, and nobody else remembers, but that's because they weren't dead. Or anyone who is alive in this final fight remembers.
Right. But yeah, my favorite is the conversation she has after the awards ceremony with Alex, because she's fighting like this sort of confusion that comes from, she remembers the fight, but she also sort of remembers this Earth always existing at the same time. So she like remembers things that she shouldn't. But then she has this conversation with Alex where she's like, I don't understand. Why did they give him a Nobel Peace Prize? He's a terrible psychopath. And she goes,
he's your boss.
He goes, he's your boss. And he's not just a good man. He's the best man.
Yeah, he owns the DEO. And his sister is good again.
Yeah, his sister is one of your biggest supporters. So maybe they're retconning the stuff with Lena from the first half of the season? Lena does not appear in this episode. But I'm curious to see what they do. But that's just one of the many changes that we discovered during this episode in this universe. So, and I think that this is the cleverness of this universe. I was really, really afraid that at the end of this crossover, it would just be like, okay, Oliver's dead, but everything else is exactly the same. And they are giving us hints in this last episode that there are going to be major changes that will affect some of the shows.
The most major of which I would argue is that baby Sarah Diggle has returned.
She has returned.
She has returned. And by the way, we have been told that should the new series, the new Canary series gets picked up, we will see future Sarah.
She's just always going to be future baby Sarah.
Future baby
Sarah.
It's like
always.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like there's some really interesting stuff, but like we see Supergirl fighting Weather Witch, who's a Flash villain.
Right, and Barry comes right in and goes, "Oh, sorry,
she's one of mine."
Kara, wait, what are you doing on my Earth?
Yeah, so it takes them a little bit to realize they're all in the same Earth.
Right, so it's like they remember what happened, but they don't know what's happening. That was very. It took a while to sort through.
Yeah, except for John Jones.
Yes.
Who is completely aware of what's going on.
And that's why he's a member of Justice League.
Right. And we get the only real direct cameo, which is super touching and is probably like the equivalent of Stan Lee.
Yes.
We get Marv Wolfman come up and ask Supergirl and the Flash to sign something for him.
And I don't think we talked about this. He co-wrote episode 4 as well.
I like that. I like that.
But yeah, it was really nice to see him, put a face to that and go, yeah, dude, your work meant something. Even though we talked about it, maybe we didn't like it as a piece of, I don't know, piece of art, comic, whatever. I mean,
as something that was put out today, it would be terrible.
But
Back
it was
then,
a great
it was
idea.
Something unique.
But
yeah. So and slowly we get a great scene with Sarah and Brendan Routh at the bar.
Yeah, because Sarah remembers. She shows up, or she goes to find Ray. Does Jean show up at this point too? To give them their memories back, or to give Ray his memories?
Ray his memories back.
Right. And so they end up having this scene where they talk about what happened.
Right, but also Ray gets to just go, was there a crossover? Did we win?
The crossover jokes were very good.
Yeah, the Legends, if you guys remember, the Legends were left out of the last crossover. There's a lot of snark about that this episode. But really, one of the strongest parts of this episode is that this is a Sarah episode. Mm-hmm. There is so much good work done by Katie Lotz in this episode. Starting with the fact that she is trying to find Oliver. She's very much in denial. She thinks that Oliver may have survived or may have gotten rewritten into this universe somehow. And so she goes in search for him, even though John Jones tells her that he's definitely dead. And we get this very touching scene between her and Diggle in the Arrow Cave. And it's just, there's some really good work being done here where she has to sort of admit that he is actually dead, that this is actually it.
Right. And her explanation of why she's so upset that Oliver was the last person who knew her before she was a canary.
Yeah. Well, the last
really
person
true.
before she was even a legend.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah. I mean, she does a good job.
Diggle met her
I
when
guess
she
that's
came
true.
back.
I guess that's true. But she does say, like, the legends are my family now, and they have been for a while. But, like, Oliver is clearly still part of that old family, right? The Laurel and Captain Lance and all of those people. And so, yeah, it is a really, really touching scene between her and Barry, I think.
We also get a great little kaiju fight that harkens to the end of this episode. In the form of Bebo.
Bebo's back!
Hooray! And Mick is very unhappy. Sorry, Rebecca. Rebecca is very unhappy. Also very prolific.
Yeah. Ah, man, that's just, it was a lot of fun. Just having Mick, because they've also discussed this. Mick and Sarah are pretty much the only original legends.
Yeah, somehow he became the second in command of the legends. Not really sure when that happened.
And Ray.
But, well.
No,
sure.
I'm just saying Ray's an original legend. I don't think that he's second
Right,
in command.
but I still think Mick is second in command.
Yeah, I mean, this was very interesting because it didn't actually have a lot of the other legends in it. We do get a very brief scene with Ava and Nate, which was great when they were like, did they Shanghai you into another crossover?
Committing a felony.
Committing a felony. You give them an inch, they commit a felony. And yeah, there's these, but you get these like very Legends-esque emotional storytelling points. Like there's Bebo, and they all have to fight Bebo,
Except it's not really Bebo.
Except for it's not really Bebo. It's like a projection. But like there's these great moments where they just get to say the most outrageous things. What's the thing that the Diggle asks about? Oh, you guys had to do this before, haven't you? And Sarah's like, yeah, it's a long story. And Ray's like, yeah, we had to like make a Bebo and to fight a time demon. Oh, I guess it wasn't that long. So there's these really great like legends moments, I think, in this episode, even though you don't get many of the characters. Right.
And we'll get to it later, but probably a Legends character is teased at the end of it.
Yes.
But oh no, the Anti-Monitor is not really dead, and he gets fought by the Paragons again, plus a few others, because they're there and they were paid for the entire crossover, so might as well have Superman in there.
Yep.
Did anyone else think it was hilarious, because we've been tracking Kara and Kate's relationship through this, that when Kate shows up, Kara just completely squeezed over her? She's just like, oh, Kate is here!
I mean,
Kate's here.
Yeah.
But, yeah, there's just these great moments.
But I think the best, when they're executing the plan so they execute the plan, so they have to make a thing, they have to make a MacGuffin, and the MacGuffin will shrink the Anti-Monitor in continuing to shrink him into infinity because you can't create or destroy antimatter. But the squad that's left behind to protect the people at Star Labs, which allows us the team up of Black Lightning, Killer Frost, and Heatwave.
Which was great.
Come on. We need that again.
Cress Williams, again, just always great.
Yeah.
He was only in like 3 scenes of this entire episode, but he just like dominates.
But just having seen those 3 scenes, I know the 3 of us, unless it's changed over the last month, Andy, we've only seen really the first season of the show, Black Lightning, and just seeing him inhabit this character in those 3 scenes, like, you've really grown into this character, and it made me almost more than anything else want to go back and watch Black Lightning now. I was very happy with his inclusion in this crossover, and I do hope there's more with him.
I think there will be, yeah.
this episode's making it very, very clear that every CW show is now on the same Earth.
Yep. Which is great.
Yes, that is wonderful. They, of course, very easily beat the Anti-Monitor.
Hooray.
And we get a kind of a disturbing scene when you think about its implications, but it's showing the other Earths.
Mm-hmm.
And we get to see Stargirl's cast on Earth 2. We get to see Swamp Thing while they mention worlds have fallen. And Swamp Thing was canceled, so...
That's... womp womp.
We get the Titans, we get the Doom Patrol. Now, what's interesting is the Titans have interacted with the Doom Patrol.
Yes, I read about that earlier. It's interesting.
So now they're kind of claiming they're on different Earths, and I don't know if that's like a real thing or if it's just, if it's just kind of a bullshitty thing. I'm not too worried about the DC Universe continuity.
No, and the thing about it is of course people were wondering, and there have been answers by the creators. They've said, well, what about Tom Welling's Earth? Is Smallville still there? And he said, yes, we just didn't show him. So it's like, okay, all right, fine, whatever.
We do get to see Green Lantern.
Yes. So basically what we did here was they set up all the future projects and gave Brandon Routh a happy ending.
Yeah, this very much felt like them trying
Watch all our other shows.
Yeah, and also Brandon Routh was an awesome Superman. This was Greg Berlanti and Guggenheim basically being like, Brandon Routh was a great Superman, fight us. Like, so...
Yeah, we're not telling you that Henry Cable is a trash Superman, but we're not telling you that either.
Right. And they very, very definitively declare this new Earth as Earth Prime.
Yes.
Now, here's one of the disturbing problems with it. Supergirl's Earth is clearly gone.
Yes.
And Black Lightning's Earth is also clearly gone.
Yes.
So while they are currently all on the same Earth, some people and beings had to stop existing.
I feel like it's a situation where you sit down and you're like, oh God, my friend George. Is George still here? Calls up George. Okay, great. George is still here. And you go through that for every single person you know. And then for the next 2 years, you'll wake up in the middle of the night and go, oh no, I forgot. And find out if somebody else is still alive. Because as long as everybody you know is still around, it's fine. Don't think about this too much. Don't think about the fact that billions and billions, maybe trillions by the time we're done counting, of people are dead, because your parallel universe person is still a person.
Well, and that was in the comic too. This idea of trying to figure out how all these people either live or don't live on this new Earth, because a lot of people just disappear. But then there's also doubles of some people.
Yeah, so they got rid of the idea of doubles.
There was this whole idea in the comics. I think it was Batgirl, where there was another version of Barbara Gordon that suddenly existed, but she didn't have a social security card.
And Robin too. Wasn't there a Robin?
There were just these people who just suddenly existed, but they didn't really exist on this Earth because bureaucratically they didn't exist on this Earth, and so it was causing all these problems because there were these doppelgangers that just existed on the same Earth.
Right, and this might be interesting things to talk about.
So one thing that I'll lob in here at this moment that's very related to this, and we have been promised by the showrunners of Arrow that this is actually going to be answered in a week's time. Which Laurel Lance are we going to see? Is it Earth 1 Laurel Lance or is it Earth 2 Laurel Lance? Or third option, is it an amalgamation of the two? Because that's a possibility, apparently. And subset of that question, Earth 2, the one that Stargirl's on, is that the former Earth 2? Might Harry Wells not be dead?
Yeah, there's some really interesting questions to be asked. Also, I really want to know if Cisco is still Vibe.
Yeah,
Like, that was something.
Yeah.
That was something that was not answered by this episode.
and that's the thing. I know I'm gonna finish Arrow. I feel like I do need to give Flash one episode to kind of sort things out before I wait for the season to finish.
Oh, just when we thought we'd gotten out.
Right?
As
Right.
Tessa and I had planned to take a hiatus, and then they hit us with a good app that set up some cool things that they will no doubt fumble.
Right. Well, Legends of Tomorrow. Speaking of Wells, we missed the MacGuffin.
The pariah of it all.
The pariah MacGuffin. I like how John Jones is just so angry at him, and he's forgotten everything, and so John Jones just rushes in and makes him remember.
Hey, fair is fair after all.
No, you fucked up.
You must remember that. But you solved it for me. Not entirely.
Oh, other thing to question: are we going to get another Shipley Garrett or a Shipley Barry Allen? Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of questions that now
Maybe.
they get a clean slate. They get to play with things like, what if Lex Luthor was good, or what if he was at least regarded as good? Like, what if baby Sarah existed? Like, is Diggle and Lila, who Lila is also still alive, is Diggle and Lila going to adopt Connor Hawke? You know, like there are a lot of questions that I think they give us here that they don't answer completely.
I do have a suggestion about John Wesley's ship, though. I think that he's played a really good role in the Flash universe. I would like to motion that we replace his periodic cameos with Ezra Miller.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, just have Ezra Miller show up.
He'd do it too. That's the thing. You know
it
he would.
really depends on how all in Warner Brothers is as a whole on this DC Universe streaming service. Right? Like if they really want to push that the cinematic universe is overlapping with the CW universe and all these things, it could be very interesting.
So I guess a larger Geek 101 question is the DC streaming service going to fold into HBO Max? And if so, when? They claim it won't.
I believe an HBO Max subscription gets you access to all the DC Universe library.
Okay, so in that case, I have hopes that we're really going to try and fold everything together. I hope.
Yeah. Well, remember, they're announcing things. We've also been told that there is a Booster Gold Blue Beetle show on the way. Berlanti's got some ideas. Berlanti and Guggenheim. So I'm excited for this, but what I'm most excited about is we get to see the Super Friends.
Yes.
I'm not going to call it the Justice League. I don't think that this is the Justice League yet. It's the Super Friends.
Well, the building, the exterior of the building has always been the Justice League from the Justice League building related to the Super Friends, but it is like the toy that they marketed in the 1980s as the Justice League building is that building that they're in.
Right.
So, I mean, they're kind of, like you said, they're really skewing toward Super Friends, but I can't not see it as the Justice League as well.
I will say, I don't know what the best line of this episode is. It has a lot of really good lines, but definitely one of the front runners has got to be Black Lightning saying, but it's not like how often do you have to save the entire world? And they all look at him and he's like, oh, so it's like that. That's got to be like one of the front runner lines of this entire episode.
Right. And the big, I'm surprised if anyone's listening to this who hasn't already seen this, but the big, super crazy reveal as they're all sitting at this table with their beautiful emblems on the back of this chair, which, by the way, Sarah is the only legend, and I kind of like that.
Well, she's the captain.
Right.
And this episode was really, really invested in the idea that she is stepping up to be a senior.
She's the leader of the Justice League.
Like,
Basically.
that's what this episode told me, is that because she's
Or
the
the
one,
Super Friends.
she's the one who gets them all together to fight the Anti-Monitors. She's the one who's invoking Oliver's memory, right, in this episode. And I get that it's like a Legends episode, so it's going to be centered on her.
But she quarterbacked the Bevo fight and then the fight later on. She's the one who tells people what to do, and nobody's like, wait, who put you in charge? They're like, yep, you're the one.
Yeah, so I would definitely say, like, I could see them positioning the Flash as being like a big part of the Arrowverse, but I think Sarah is kind of the new person who's going to give the orders.
Well,
at least when
we
they're
will
around.
have to find out. But we
to
do
your
hear
point-
monkey noises, and somebody mentions getting an exterminator, and we see, what do we see, Sam?
It's Gleek's cage.
Gleek.
I
Because
am
we don't see Gleek. That's crazy talk.
so I think that we are going to find out that Gleek jumped on the Wave Rider.
That would be pretty awesome.
And he and Constantine are going to become best friends.
I also
No?
wonder if that means that we might get the Super Twins sometime soon, or maybe it's next year's crossover.
That would be fun.
Are they gonna be able to do crossovers like this anymore? Like, I feel like crossovers after this are gonna have to be like
Well,
really pared down.
They made a cryptic tease in an interview that I read that the crossovers are going to go back to basics, and I'm like, oh no, wait, please don't let that be another backdoor pilot with Hawkman and Hawkgirl.
Yeah, don't do that.
That was the first thing I thought.
Do
I was
the
like, wait,
first
no.
one, not the second one.
No. I think that they're going to give it a few years before they do something even close to this large.
Right.
And I think that it'll be when the Flash is ending.
I could see that.
Right?
Like, send off
we'll
the
do another
Flash.
one of the crises.
Mm-hmm. Because
Kinda
there are
wrap things
infinite
up.
of them, right? There are infinite
Yeah.
crises, correct?
Yeah, but I forgot. You know, like they could do any one of the just crises, or even another version of Flashpoint or something. But
Flashpoint 2.0.
This time it's personal.
or Rebirth or whatever. But
Oh,
I also think that they'll take that time to measure how everything's going in the, like with the DC Universe streaming service. We do know that Stargirl is also going to be airing on the CW.
Yeah.
As well as the DC Universe. So I think that they're going to wait a little bit and maybe consider collapsing everything together in a few years.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely need to give it time to breathe. As they said, you don't do Endgame and then do Endgame again. You'd have to do something else in between. But Andy, you mentioned Rebirth, and that reminded me of something really cool at the end of the episode. When the president is giving her speech, where she says we live in the age of heroes right now, which, by the way, is a really big deal because the vigilante question is over. That's one of the things that's signaled by Oliver dying and Arrow ending. These characters are not vigilantes. They are heroes. We're not gonna do DC Civil War with the Registration Act and any of that stuff. They're heroes now. That was really important. But when she was giving that speech, did you notice the number of the network, in the lower right-hand corner of the screen?
No.
52. We are in the new 52. So there you are.
Overall, what would you guys say? Like, where would you place this crossover in the list of crossovers?
Oh.
Wow.
You
All right.
know, it's hard because the scope is completely different.
I will go ahead and say what I think.
Okay.
Go ahead. Let's have it.
All right, I think Crisis on Earth X is number 1. I think this is number 2. I think that Elseworlds is after that, and then Invasion. Those are the major crossovers.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, actually. Thinking about it, because Crisis on Earth X is clearly, as far as a crossover event goes, that's clearly the best one.
Yeah.
Yes.
This one had the best moments.
Yes.
Right, and it's also the one that felt the most, each individual episode felt the most from their individual series, right? Like the last episode did feel very much like a Legends episode.
Mhm.
But I feel like Crisis did a little bit of a better job with that. This was also hurt by the freaking month-long gap.
That was not a good idea.
Yeah, we had to have like a whole conversation before we started watching the 4th episode of, okay, who's dead? Who's alive? What happened? Like, definitely did not need that gap.
And that's why I think that's why I think the first 4 episodes should have been made into 3 episodes instead, or they should have shown them all before the break. And the reboot would have been a good place to take a month break if that's what you wanted to do.
Like have 2 episodes on the new Earth.
Yeah. To be like, we
Yeah.
saved the universe. Come back in a month and we'll show you what it looks like. That would have been better.
Yeah. So there you have it, guys. We are done.
We did it. We did it. Please please nobody start another massive TV universe of shows. Please don't. We don't have time. Don't do it.
Well,
Great.
Don't worry. We just had a tease at the end of the Morbius trailer that Sony is really getting ready to do their Sinister Six, and I'll talk about that more on the main episode of Geek 101 this week. Anyway, guys, go ahead. Plug your pluggables.
I'm on Twitter at Swela Tessa, SWEHLA.
And I'm on Twitter at Sam_Morris9. And by the way, everything I said about franchising does not apply to Ahsoka, all the Ahsoka shows.
All right. You can find me on Twitter at Hebrews Pale Ale, and you can find the podcast anywhere you download podcasts at Geek 101. That's all we have for today. Class dismissed.